Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews in the podcast form. Today we're talking about a movie with one of my favorite actors who unfortunately turned in probably one of my least favorite movies of his. Hypnotic, starring Ben Affleck, directed by Robert Rodriguez. That was an interesting pairing for me from the start. I saw next to no advertising for this movie anywhere. It was fate that I happened to be on AMC's app. I was trying to book tickets for another movie, and then I see Hypnotic, a new Ben Affleck movie. So I start doing some digging, and I start looking into it, and I'm like, okay, Robert Rodriguez has written and directed this. It's got a $65 million budget, and they shot it in the same set that they had built for Alita Battle Angel that James Cameron had produced and Robert Rodriguez had directed. And it's supposed to be the detective loses his daughter. She goes missing. He's obviously, years later, he's still upset by it. And then something happens. Some robberies start taking place. Something weird's going on, but he feels like maybe it's all tied to my missing daughter somehow. There's something bigger at play. So it's got this mystery thriller lean to it. Promises some action. So I don't know. I was hesitant. I knew I'd wanted to see the Blackberry movie. Fool's Paradise was kind of like, all right. You know what else am I doing today? We'll do it back to back. And then I'm like, okay. And then they got Hypnotic. And I'm like, well, I feel like that has to be a little bit better than Fool's Paradise. And then after seeing Fool's Paradise, I was like, there's no way this is going to be worse than Fool's Paradise. But the end result was something that I just don't quite get. This is a movie that feels like it should have been made, I want to say 20 years ago, which I think would be the 90s, but no, almost 30 years ago. And that reveals more about me than I should probably let on, because now I'm getting old. But this feels like some late 80s, early 90s. It wouldn't go straight to DVD. I'm sure it would actually do well in theaters. The story is interesting enough. This use of hypnotism or these ideas of, things that could be stored within your memories or dreams, your ability to influence people. This movie has some interesting supernatural elements to it. But it doesn't ever really get exciting. And maybe that's part of the whole shebang. It's called Hypnotic because we wanted to lull you in and keep you uncertain, keep you guessing. And granted, I think there were some pretty interesting twists and turns throughout this movie. It definitely caught me off guard more than a few times. But it just feels outdated. It feels outdated, and it feels like everyone was kind of turning in a half-assed performance. And it's hard to say as someone who I like Ben Affleck a lot. Obviously, he's my favorite Batman. I think he's a great actor. But there was just no energy from him here. And I get, he's a detective who's just been in sorrow for years since his daughter was abducted. But you get nothing from him here. There's, the only emotion you get is related to the daughter. And when it's there, it's great. But it just kind of, it doesn't just flow that well. For a movie that's, hardly 90 minutes, it feels like a little bit of a slugfest to get to the finish line. By the time you make it to the end, you're like, all right, please, I know we got to be wrapping it up now. We've had more twists than I could count now, and things keep happening, and you're like, are we getting a sequel to this? Is this it was just so odd. I like Alice Braga a lot just as an actor. She kind of plays opposite of Ben Affleck's character. And you've got William Fichtner, who's a great actor and, a formidable bad guy, as we've seen in many movies. But even he's kind of phoning it in, he's this ultimate big bad guy and you got to stay away from him. Or in these moments where you feel like, okay, yep, oh yeah, you got caught. You're probably going to die. Something small and mildly inconvenient happens and it's like, that got away. Well, you know what? That's all right, because it gives us time to regroup and time to try again. And so it really does feel like this, like, all right, we get mild action. You get action light, but it's never anything wild enough to totally sustain your interest or so thrilling as you're jumping between trains and running around. There's an entire scene where they're running around a train yard. And I'm like, these guys have guns. They could just shoot you. And maybe for some reasons that you might find out they don't shoot, or maybe they want him alive, whatever. But if you're really just like chasing this guy down, I'm like, are you really just jogging? You're not getting paid to jog out here. Neither's Ben Affleck. I'm like, if you're running for your life, I'm like, what are you jogging for, my guy? It just, so many scenes in this movie, they just lack enthusiasm. They lack a kinetic energy that just grabs onto you and you're like, all right, this is some cool action. And I don't even say that as someone who's probably more desensitized to action in film than others. I see a lot of movies, play a decent number of games. I've seen some cool, crazy, awesome action stunts. And I'm not saying that I have to have that bar for every movie, but I think it really does speak to where a director can obviously change things. We're having stunt and fight choreographers can really go and make a difference as well. But I'm also wondering where $65 million went on this movie, especially if you're reusing a set that you've already built in the past. I'm like, I know Ben Affleck's probably your top billed actor. I'm like, I'm sure he's making some cool million. I don't know. For a movie like this, I don't know. Robert Rodriguez, I'm sure he got a nice little payday, but I just wonder why. Or why did you think, and not to be rude, but why did you think that this was the movie to put in theaters? People were kind of comparing, because J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, of course, Ben Affleck's person, now that they've rekindled and reunited. They both had releases on that same Friday. She had a movie, The Mother, coming out on Netflix, action movie. It looks like it's in a similar vein in the sense that you're like, all right, maybe it's like B-movie production. And I'm just going to say it, Netflix really hasn't impressed me much with most of their original films that they've released. Triple Frontier that they had with Ben Affleck was pretty good, but it still went on too long and kind of falls apart at the end. But in my head, I'm like, wow, Ben Affleck's really going to come out of the weekend maybe with he could come out with the hit. Not that I haven't seen the J-Lo movie, so I won't speak on its quality. I can only speak on what I've read and, again, my past experience with Netflix original movies. But wow, I feel like she had to win that weekend. I don't know how much her movie cost, but I'm like, this movie made a couple million, I think, opening weekend, Hypnotic. I'm like, it feels like something that should have come out on Netflix. And maybe that's because you are built in with the expectation that, hey, I know it's not going to be like a huge box office budget film, but this will probably play better at home. And it totally would. It's going to be out on digital in a couple weeks anyways, I believe. But I don't know. I wonder how much money it costs to put it in the theaters before putting it into streaming. I'm like, are you going to lose money putting this into almost empty theaters and not advertising it at all? And it feels like one of these moments, though, too, where obviously some other actors who are more tuned in with social media use that to their advantage. The Rock, Lord knows he would never not promote a movie on Instagram or Twitter or something. If I'm Ben Affleck, and now granted, maybe he wants to keep this film under the radar because he doesn't want to see people reacting to him phone it in. But I'm like, you could have said, hey, check out my new movie, Hypnotic. I'm working with Robert Rodriguez, the guy who did Spy Kids and all these other, I don't know. I'm like, you could have said a billion different things to get people to at least come and see the movie or give it a shot. So it just all feels a little lazy at the end of the day. I mean, it's not a bad movie. It was definitely entertaining enough. And like I said, I'm like, I'm always open to be surprised in a movie. Even if some of the twists or things are kind of dumb later on when you think about it, maybe. I don't know. In the moment, I was like, oh, okay. I didn't see that coming. I didn't think that that person was going to whatever, you know? I like those moments. I like when a movie can kind of shock me or keep me guessing, unlike my mom who just, every movie that I try to show her, not even halfway through, it's like, oh, you know what? He's totally going to do this, or she's going to die, or she's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and you got to laugh it off like it's not true. And you're like, what are you talking about? No, just watch the movie, And I'm like, damn it. How did she know? How does she, But that's because a lot of these movies, sometimes they just spell it out for you. They spell it out for the general audience. And so, this movie's a weird in between. It could even make a weird young adult fiction novel from 30 years ago. I don't know. I wonder about its place in 2023. Once it goes digital, I'm sure I would hope a streaming service picks it up. Cause again, I don't even know if you'd really want to rent this movie for the weekend. I probably personally wouldn't recommend it, but if it pops up for free on Netflix or Amazon or somewhere, totally. Just why not? If you got time, if you just need to throw something on that you've never seen before, go for it. And that's probably where it will serve you best. So I was a little disappointed, but I've been doing this long enough to have a pretty decent idea of maybe where a movie will land. So I'm glad my expectations weren't so high for this film. And like I said, you guys, I promise you, this next episode, we're gonna get back on track. We're gonna have one I can really recommend to you, and I think you're gonna like it. So stay tuned for the next time, guys. Thanks again.